Olá! No dia 9 de janeiro de 2021, a Sociedade de Bromélias de San Diego realizou seu primeiro encontro desse ano. E nós tivemos o prazer de fazer uma apresentação chamada Bromélias no Brasil, da natureza ao Jardim Fitogeográfico. Muitas pessoas não tiveram a chance de assistir, então agora nós vamos trazer para você a gravação. Divirtam-se.
San Diego Bromeliad Society is really happy this January 2021 to introduce to you a featured speaker from Brazil, Orlando Graff. And with his talk, I'd like to just keep in mind that here on the right slide, you can see the states of Brazil in which we're going to have a fun ride through those different states. Orlando is an agronomist, a phytogeographer, and an independent naturalist. He's also former director of the Brazilian Bromeliad Society, manager of the private protected area Reserva Natural, manager of his private collection, the Phytogeographical Garden in Rio de Janeiro, and author of the book Phytogeography de Brazil in Portuguese, and author of the book Brazilian Landscape Iconography, both in Portuguese and in English, published this year. With that, I'd like to give my screen over to Orlando Graff.
How are you?
Good.
Nice to be here.
Welcome.
I think we should go straight to what really matters.
Yes.
So this is our presentation. I'm going to share my screen now. Let's go to the Bromeliad and Control L. It always takes some minutes for it to go.
Well, we can look at the beautiful Alcantarilla in the meantime. That's nice.
It's Alcantarilla Naomi from the state of Bahia. We're going to show some more of it ahead. Let's go. Oh, now here it goes. Okay. Yeah, I took this main title from the group sponsored by Barry Landau and Pedro Naum in the Facebook. It's a very interesting group that gathers a lot of good guys who post their photos and comments in a very nice level. If you want to get the news about bromeliads in Brazil, just go there and check it. All images in this presentation are mine, including landscape and botanic illustrations that belong to my recently published book, Brazilian Landscape Iconography. If anyone gets interested in purchasing the book, please contact the publisher through the website. The book counts on a beautifully written English version by Nicole Ann Collett, and I'm sure you will be able to learn more about Brazilian nature. And why do I talk about phytogeography? Well, that's the branch of science I'm now dedicated to. In a few words, it's the science that studies vegetation, its functional and ecological relations with the environment, and its dispersion throughout the land. This drawing features a high-altitude forest in Macaé de Cima, state of Rio de Janeiro, on the summit of a peak more than 1,500 meters high. You can see the type of vegetation that carries a lot of epiphytes. Among them, you can see Alcantarella nevarese, named after the late president of the Brazilian Bromeliad Society, Luiz Felipe Nevares de Carvalho, who was a friend of mine. Major part of Brazilian landscapes have bromeliads. Here you see a high altitude field in the state of Rio Grande do Sul. They can be found growing on trees. Many of them live on the ground, and lots of them will grow on both supports. Present landscapes are a result of long processed environmental changes in which many groups of plants assembled and formed communities. We are here now talking about bromeliads because they represent an important group. They work as tools for the comprehension of ecological processes. And what is the Phytogeographical Garden? It is a collection of native plants from Brazil. arranged in a simulation of their natural habitats. The Phytogeographical Garden, which we call here in Brazil Jardim Fitogeográfico, is sited in Petrópolis, state of Rio de Janeiro. As you can well imagine, bromeliads represent most of the plants. In this slide, you can see the graphic representation of a support tree, which contains some bromeliads and at least one orchid over here, Lélia crispa. To understand bromeliads in nature, we have to observe how they made their way throughout South America. These are the believed paths of bromeliads during the Tertiary period. During those million years, they evolved into the groups and forms we know now. This is Ecmea bromeliifolia in a tubular form from the Central Plateau of Brazil. Their morphology developed adaptations to stand either dry or humid ambients. This is Vrisia sanfranciscana in Serra da Canastra. This is Ananasoides, a typical plant from the Cerrado savanna in central Brazil. The last 2 million years that we know as the Quaternary were decisive to define their shapes and their distribution. Take a look at this Tillandsia tenuifolia in Chapada Diamantina, state of Bahia. Tillandsia durati, very curious plant. And this one here is Encolirium erectiflorum from the Caatinga, the dry vegetation northeast of Brazil. Functional diversity is the result of such a history. We know now that every ecosystem gathers inside it many groups and forms of plants, which survive in particular refuges. Those forms can supply the environment that needed response to changing conditions. You see a xerophytic Dichia maritima amid subtropical forest in the state of Rio Grande do Sul on a rocky outcrop and the forest right behind it. In this picture, you see the tank-dependent Bromeliads, Alcantareia naumi, on a rocky outcrop in the middle of the Caatinga, a dry area. But of course, the most adapted forms will always dominate the landscape, as you see here. Neoregelias dominate the scene in a lowland tropical forest of Rio de Janeiro. You can find other forms as refugees in smaller patches, where the microclimate allows them to grow. This will be what we'd call rare plants. It's beautiful. I love the place. Well, let's start now our ride across the country and its bromeliads. The Atlantic Plateau is a huge and extensive wall of mountain ranges that faces the Atlantic Ocean and separates the humid territory from the rest of the country. In this picture, we see the Serra da Maria Comprida mountain range near Petrópolis, state of Rio de Janeiro, home to many exclusive bromeliads. This is the famous Salto Morato, a beautiful waterfall sited in the hillside of Serra do Mar mountain range in the state of Paraná. The Atlantic Plateau gives way to many different types of vegetation, most of them being dense and moisty forests. This is a lowland forest near the shore. It's usually very rich in bromeliads, being most of them tank-dependent plants that we are going to call here tank bromeliads. You see here a beautiful display of Neuregelia on a ficus tree near Paraty, Rio de Janeiro, an emergent tree in the coastal land forest. In the same place near Paraty, Rio de Janeiro, you see Neuregelia joannis, Neuregelia correa araújoi, and Kesnelia arvensis. You see the inflorescence of Kesnelia arvensis over here. And this is Vrisia incurvata from that Salto Morato Park in Paraná. And that's how a coastal lowland forest looks like in the landscape. It's worth the visit, I can grant you. This is another picture from the coastal lowland forests in the same area you just saw. The floatable forests have plenty of water at their feet. The ambience is excellent for epiphytes. See a coastal floatable forest south of Rio de Janeiro, near Angra dos Reis and Paraty, with lots of a reddish form of Vrisia rhodesiana. You see them here. I'm pointing them. This is too a coastal floatable forest in the state of Santa Catarina, dominated by Eckmea nudicaulis, a large clump of Vrisia filippo-coburgi, together with Chilances stricta. You see lots of Chilances stricta over here, and Eckmea nudicaulis all around in the same floatable area in Santa Catarina. When we go up the mountain ranges of famous Serra do Mar, we find taller trees, lots of climbers, and a lot of bromeliads. The flora is very similar to that from the lowlands, but the taller trees open ecological space for bromeliads to grow on the ground or on elevated branches, sometimes more than 30 meters above our heads. This is near Mangaratiba in Rio de Janeiro, one of our expeditions. This is Nidularium procerum, a ground jewelling plant from that kind of forest. This is Vrisia carinata. I guess a lot of people know this plant. It's very well known. And this is Neuregelia rubrovitata from north of Rio de Janeiro. For me, it's one of the most beautiful plants you can see in the forest. Well, when we reach the summits of the high elevated mountains, more than 1,000 meters above the sea level, sometimes more, we find a very different type of landscapes. They may vary from open fields to low forests that we call cloud forests. The name cloud forests is due to the fact that they capture the moisture straight from the clouds that touch the peaks almost every day. You see it. Watch some of the beautiful landscapes seen from the top of Serra da Maria Comprida mountain range in Rio de Janeiro. You see, these are the famous blue amaryllis. They are not in flower now, but a very rare plant. And this is the top of Serra da Maria Comprida. Neuregelia leimaniana is one of the beautiful plants from the high altitude forest of Rio de Janeiro. Vrisia gutata. This is a drawing of mine from 1993, featuring the Vrisia gutata. Vrisia tirsoidea. It grows on the top of Serra dos Órgãos mountain range in Rio de Janeiro. The vision there is simply astonishing. When you get to these plants, we get on our knees immediately. This is Vrisia itatiaia. You see how they can grow directly on the surface of the rock or even as an epiphyte. This belongs to the Serra da Mantiqueira range, south of Rio de Janeiro and part of São Paulo and Minas Gerais state. And this is Nidularium marigoi. I love the plant and I love its name because Luiz Cláudio Marigo was one of the best photographers of wildlife in Brazil, and he was the one who signed that book with Elton Leme about the Brazilian Bromeliads. And the name was given to honor Luiz Cláudio Marigo. He was still alive at that time. This is Pharynacea itatiaia. It's a very rare plant from the top of the Mantiqueira range. This is the way they grow among the rocks. And this is a closer vision of the Pharynacea itatiaia. This is Pitcairnea flammea. It's so well known on the top of the Serra da Maria Comprida range. The rocky outcrops are considered to be refuges of a past flora. Some call them Pleistocenic refuges because they gather plants that once dominated the landscape during the Pleistocene, something like 2 million years ago. Let's look at some of its bromeliads. This is Encolirium horridum from the state of Espírito Santo. It's being threatened by granite mining, which has increased in the last decades. Here you see the well-known Alcantara imperialis, the queen of the Brazilian bromeliads, growing in a cliff wall together with the also famous blue amaryllis. Here you can see the flowers, a very exclusive plant from the rocky outcrops too. You see? They seem to be one only plant. This one here is a tiny plant restricted to a very small patch of rocky outcrop in Rio de Janeiro. Tillandsia reclinata has been intensively collected by clandestine collectors who sell them for high prices and are leading it to extinction. You see at the right the type of place they inhabit. It just grows directly on the surface of the rock. Some of its flowers appear here. This is Tillandsia roseiflora, another tiny bromelia that inhabits the rocky outcrops. But this one grows usually on small bushes hanging way high on the cliff walls. By the seashore, you will find some other ecosystems that can be rich in bromeliads, such as these restingas and the mangrove formations. You see Echinacea blanchetiana here, a well-known plant in Brazil, growing in a mangrove formation and swampy areas of the state of Bahia. Watch this stunning view of a large population of Echinacea blanchetiana in a swampy area in southern Bahia. All of these are Echinacea blanchetiana with its reddish form. There you can see the Atlantic forest over there, right behind. Echinacea marauensis is another restricted plant from the state of Bahia. It grows among small bushes along the sandy restingas, south from Salvador. And this is the enchanting Hohenbergia castellanosi, another endangered plant due to its extraction from their fragile ecosystems along the shore in the state of Bahia. They are amazing. The place is simply unforgettable. You can see its restricted way of growing, occupying some very particular spots in the open area of the Restinga. Here you can see Vrisia friburgensis in a Restinga of southern state of Santa Catarina. Last but not least, a new species of Bromelia that is being studied and published by Elton Leme and Bruno Rezende, Hohenbergia carnavali, native to the taller Restingas of Bahia. It's amazing, amazing plant. It grows almost straight on the water. It's a strange way of growing. Well, when we leave the shore behind and travel to the west, we meet the vast territory of central Brazil, with its outstanding landscapes where the Cerrado savanna reigns absolutely. Just watch this. I just can't wait to get back there. This is in the state of Goiás. Eckmea bromelifolia is by far the most important bromeliad of central Brazil, featuring many interesting forms, such as this large clump of the albobracteata, seen in the middle of the open savanna. You can see the inflorescence here. And here you see one of its most common forms in the state of Goiás. Here you can see Eckmea setigera that follows some of the long river basins in the central plateau. In the second picture, this one here, you can see a clump of Eckmea setigera hanging over the waters of the Rio das Mortes River in the Mato Grosso state, where we run a private protected area called Fazenda Ipanema Nature Reserve. This type of sandstone formations near the border of the Mato Grosso Pantanal can form astonishing landscapes, home to plants not very well known yet. Those plants, for example, are cited as Encolilium leimanianum, but there is a lot of discussion about this case because some say it's really Dickia leimaniana. By the way, many species of Dickia appear on shallow soils and rocky outcrops along the state of Mato Grosso, suggesting this to be a hot spot for genetic variation. See Dickia or Encolilium leimanianum. This is Dickia rondonopolitana, a very restricted plant. This one here is Dickia secundifolia, just because of the shape of the leaves. And this is a species of Dickia from Serra do Roncador, near the famous Araguaia River. Bromelia balance is an interesting indicator of types of soils and conditions found in vegetation. In the famous Pantanal swamplands, they will show exactly the parts of the landscape where you have annual flooding. You see here, water comes over here, but it doesn't cross this area. Bromelia balance will never grow in floodable terrains. The same thing happens to some palm trees. These are the acuris that abound in Pantanal. That's the way they make part of these islands of vegetation people call cordilleras, which are not so elevated, but only a few meters above the flooding area. But many other species of this genus can be found in hinterland of Brazil. This is Bromelia silvicula, near a rocky outcrop. Mato Grosso. This is Bromelia silvicula as well, growing in the middle of the Cerrado savanna. The severe conditions faced in central Brazil induce adaptations, as you can see in this case of a Bilbergia porteana growing on the rock crevice in Mato Grosso. It's just like a cave among these rocks. And there is Bilbergia porteana. It's also the case of this Deuteroconia mesiana populations growing on outcrops of iron ore in the border of Bolivia, is in our state of Mato Grosso do Sul, Serra do Urucum, for those who want to know. And take a look at this beautiful clump of Deuteroconia mesiana, the same plant, showing their nice gray leaves and these reddish flowers. You can see the reddish flowers against the stone wall. Now we get the rupestrin fields. I guess they should be considered as a separate biome. The ecological conditions there are unique, although they are still considered to be part of the Cerrado biome. There you can find stunning populations of Velosia from the Velosiaceae family. Some epiphytes are found exclusively in the bark of Velosia trunks. You can see here Cattleya cincorana growing strictly on the trunks of Velosia cincorana in Chapada Diamantina. This Velosias, it's in Minas Gerais, Serra do Cipó. Excuse me. Isolated boulders host important populations of bromeliads, such as this Echimea disticanta, showing a special tubular form. You can see here also Vrisia sanfranciscana growing on the basis of the boulder, together with the Velosia species over here. See, these are the Velosia, and these are Echimea disticanta. This is in Serra da Canastra, state of Minas Gerais, incredible landscapes of chapadas that are extensive and dramatic tablelands. Neuregelia baiana in the enormous Velosia gigantea. They grow at the bases. It's difficult to see here, but Neuregelia baiana. Vrisia atropurpurea, growing on shallow soils of the rupestриan fields of Minas Gerais, Serra do Cipó. Wildfires influence the selection of plants in a natural environment. There is still a lot of discussion about its true role in the Brazilian nature. But many bromeliads that inhabit the extent summits can resist to bushfire, just like this Dicea minarum. You see, it's recently burnt, but it's flowering. See Vrisia sanfranciscana from Serra da Canastra in a kind of a defensive clump that helps to resist fire. You can see here Dicea sordida from Serra do Cipó, Encolirium subsecundum, also from Serra do Cipó. This is the beautiful Dicea argentea from the Serra de São José mountain range in state of Minas Gerais. They are so delicate, but spiny plants. And this is the tiny Dicea marnier lapostoli from the state of Goiás. See here, Cincorea albopicta. It was once known as Orthophyton albopictum from Chapada Diamantina, state of Bahia. Vrisia diamantinensis from Minas Gerais. It looks like an alcantareia in the landscape, but it's not. It's a Vrisia. Echimea nudicaulis growing on rocky outcrops in Serra de São José, Minas Gerais state too. And this is the Cotendorfia florida in Chapada Diamantina, kingdom of the great king vulture, the drylands to the northeast of Brazil, the Caatinga domains. It's the absolute empire of the genus Encolirium, as you can see here in this rocky outcrop, state of Piauí. The sertão is what we call the core area of the Caatinga. It corresponds to its drier area, where you can find the curious Encolirium erectiflorum, restricted to the state of Ceará. It's an unusual form for Encoliriums. And the Neoglasiovia variegata that may hide in the middle of the dry and poor vegetation of the Caatinga to flower in a splendid way with this deep red inflorescence you can see here. In the famous San Francisco River Valley, you will find the iconic karstic landscapes featuring the immense paunchy panes that we call here barrigudas, those trees. They are Cavanilesia umbellata, home to a lot of xeric plants, including bromeliads. You can see here, especially Encolirium plants of Encolirium, of the karstic landscapes. When the caatinga is submitted to the light moisture that comes from the Atlantic, things get a little more different, and you see the agreste, home to a lot of well-known plants, just like this Eckmea achilliga. I guess most of you know Eckmea achilliga. It's a very diffused plant. And the amazing Weinberger stellata. Inside the dry forests of the agreste in the state of Bahia, we find the strange paradox of immense tank bromeliads. In these areas, the water kept inside their rosettes may represent the only source of water for the animals. It's the case of the remarkable Caravata multiflora, once known as Eckmea multiflora. They changed the genus. In this picture, we can see Alcantarea naumi, a typical tank bromeliad related to the moist climate, meeting a dense clump of xeric Encolirium spectabile on a rock outcrop of Bahia. And here you can see Cryptanthus baianus, a ground jewelling plant from the agreste. The Amazon. Well, the Amazon is one of the most known rainforests in the world. Northwest of the Amazon is believed to be one of the cradle of Bromeliad dispersion throughout South America, despite of the humble presence of the family group in its forests today. It's the case of this Eckmea valerandi. It was once known as Streptocalyx pepigi, and then as Eckmea biriana. Now it's Eckmea valerandi. Tillandsia adpressiflora, that looks like a brisea and inhabit drier vegetation forms of the Amazon. By the way, the Amazon has open forests too. This is the case of the Campinarana vegetation near the Rio Negro River, which is rich in epiphytes. Bromeliads abound in number, although not in diversity of species. Strangely, most of the plants found here are orchid, from the Orchidaceae family. You see lots of bromeliads in a place like this, but not in number. Eckmea meritense is very important in the Campinarana. It can grow either as an epiphyte or as a ground jewelling plant. I guess it depends on the opportunity it takes. And finally, we reach the subtropical domain in southern Brazil. The Brazilian pine Araucaria angustifolia is like a trademark of these landscapes. Eckmea disticanta is widespread in the subtropical forests. But many other bromeliads occur in specific areas, like this Vrisia septrum in Mantiqueira mountain range near São Paulo. Here we see them together with Nidularium marigoi. Do you remember Nidularium marigoi here? A very typical landscape in southern Brazil is the mosaic of grass fields and pine forests over the elevated basalt cliffs of Santa Catarina state, home for bromeliads like Eckmea recurvata. It's one of my favorite plants, Eckmea recurvata. It's a lovely plant to find inside the forest. And at last, we get to the Phytogeographical Garden. Like I told you, it's known in Portuguese as Jardim Fitogeográfico. It is in fact my own private garden. I live here, near the city of Petrópolis, state of Rio de Janeiro. Time has been the most important to transform it into the living collection it is today. You see, by the 2007, 10 years after, and a couple of years ago. The arboretum is a result of forest restoration. You just saw it. And we have trails in the area where many of the plants live in a natural ambient. In the open areas, we have flower beds and arrangements that copy some of the landscapes you have just seen in the wilderness. Just a curiosity, that rocky outcrop over here is the only population known of that Chilancia graziella. Here in this part of the hill, nowhere else. I guess we have just found some other populations over here, but nowhere else in the world. Well, believe me, there's a lot of organization involved in it, just like Juliana told you. Let's go now for a ride and see some of the plants of the Phytogeographical Garden. I don't want to waste so much of your time. This is Bilbergia saundersi. It's a ground dwelling plant from the state of Bahia. This one here is a famous plant among Bromeliads growers, Vrisia erythrodactylum. It's a very well-known plant from the Atlantic forest. Here you can see Neuregelia Correa Araújo over there. You can see Neuregelia carcharodon here, and here one of those Velociacea I told you, Barbacenia purpurea. Ecmea amicorum is a plant from southern Bahia. This Ecmea castelnavi comes from the Serra do Cachimbo mountain range north of Mato Grosso. The plants from the Amazon, they are usually very spiny. If you try to touch this, only the hummingbirds can do it. This one here is Canistrum sindelianum. It's a very well-known plant too, from the Atlantic forest. This form of Ecmea disticanta, I found it many years ago in the state of Paraná. It maintains this reddish form and grows on sunny conditions. This is one of our sunsets with the Muse fountain here, the arrangements all over the place. Just in this little space, we have more than 50 plants, 50 species of plants, only in this part of the garden. They are hidden in many places, and we got maps of their situation, their spotting. Here, Ecmea fasciata, of course, this beautiful Ecmea fasciata rubra from the Atlantic forest. Ecmea farinosa comes from the state of Bahia on high elevated forests. Right in the middle of the Caatinga, you have those they call Inselbergs, that are isolated mountains that can have forests in the top of it. This is Ecmea gracilis, a plant from the southern coast of Rio de Janeiro. This one here is a beautiful plant. It is in flower now. Ecmea lilacinanta from Petrópolis. It's a recently described plant from Elton Leme. This is Ecmea macroclamis. It comes from Espírito Santo state. It grows in the Atlantic forest. This is one of our arrangements that just copy a restinga vegetation. This is how they grow in the vegetation, and this is how I keep them over here. There's a lot of work, but it's worth the effort. This is Ecmea veubaki from the Atlantic forest. Ecmea marauensis. You saw the restingas of Bahia. This is Vrisia garlipiana. It comes from some high elevated mountains north of Rio de Janeiro. It's a very restricted plant too. Beautiful Vrisia scalaris. It looks like stairways or musical scales. I prefer to see them as musical scales. They seem to dance when they are in flower. This is Vrisia rubi. Vrisia rubi is a very restricted plant of the high elevated mountains of Rio de Janeiro too. Ecmea leptanta was once known as Portia leptanta from the northeast of Brazil. One of our trails inside the forest, you see how the bromeliads are kept just like if they were in nature. In this place, you can see Ecmea pinelliana, in this first plane here, together with Vrisia hieroglyphica, the exact way it grows inside the forests of Rio de Janeiro, São Paulo, Minas Gerais. This is a very famous plant too. See Ecmea correa araujoi, a variegated plant with this beautiful stem hanging over here. Bromelia oste comes from the Mato Grosso plateau. This Neuregelia macaensis was once known as Neuregelia cruenta rubra. I guess this is the only plant that is not Brazilian over here, Pitcairn angustifolia, but it's a very beautiful plant. I just wanted to show you the plant, how it grows. I took this plant as a gift from Luis Felipe Nevares de Carvalho some 20 years ago, and I keep it with great care because I miss him. This is Dica alba from the high elevated cliffs, the basalt cliffs from Rio Grande do Sul. For me, it's one of the most beautiful dicas all around. Here you can see Neuregelia cruenta, the true Neuregelia cruenta over here, together with Neuregelia paratiensis, and side by side with Schwartzia brasiliensis, is a Markgraviacea. This plant belongs to the restingas of the coastal zone of Rio, Espírito Santo, São Paulo, and I guess they reach Santa Catarina state too. They can attract hummingbirds as much as the Bromeliads can do. One more of our sunsets. And this Alcantarea geniculata. It comes from the rocky outcrops of Rio de Janeiro. My favorite, Ecmea recurvata. It's a beautiful plant. This Ecmea ramosa festiva. You see here the flowers and you see here the fruits. Both of them are very decorative. It comes from the Atlantic forest too. This is Dica secundifolia from Mato Grosso plateau. Portia alatisepala. It's a beautiful plant from Atlantic forest too. It's showy. You can see it from great distance. And finally, one of the most beautiful bromeliads you can find here in Brazil, Roembergia castellanosi. I showed you in the restingas of Bahia state. When they are in flower, they assume this red form that can reach the entire plant when the conditions are good. That's right, thank you. We look forward to having you all in Brazil as soon as we overcome these challenging times. A fantastic new year of bromeliads to all of those who love and protect nature, and 2021. Believe me, the best is yet to come.
Wonderful, wonderful.
Want me to? I will maintain the presentation here. So if one of you guys want to ask something about one of the pictures, I can go back and we can show it again. Is it all right? Can it be? Okay. Does
That
any
was great. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Yes, thank you very much. Does anybody have any questions for Orlando? We could take about 3 or 4 questions.
Could he
This
show
Sandy-
the book again at the beginning of his presentation? His book, his new book?
Oh, yes.
I
Let's
think
go
it was
there.
slide 1.
I'm going to go there quickly.
I have a question.
As I can.
This is Sandy. Can you hear me?
Yes.
I have a
Let's go
question.
there. Oh,
How's it?
Here it
Thank you. Hold on.
I'm talking with Sandy, isn't it,
Yes.
Sandy?
Yes,
Yeah.
Sandy.
You
Hi,
can-
how are you? So wonderful presentation, very interesting. How the bromeliads grow in Brazil and the various climates. In San Diego, you don't live in San Diego, correct?
No, I live in Rio.
So with all your personal bromeliads, what do you grow them in based on, everywhere you showed us, they all grow in different places. Do you have a standard formula for your soil that you use, or what do you grow them in?
Just let me tell you, I'm not a very good grower. Believe me, I am not. I count on the help of nature. We live here in a place that is I could say it's almost a perfect place to grow bromeliads. So I count with the help of nature. But I do my best. I'm an agronomist, and I try to care for some nutrition, and that's all. And I try to spot the most perfect place for each one of them. The collection, the gardens you just saw, they change all the time, because the forest, for instance, it evolves. It develops a bigger form, and I have to change places of the bromeliads, trying to get the perfect light and the perfect moist. It's difficult, but it's challenging. I love this, but there is no particular form or formula, not a secret. I can assure you.
Yeah, can I put my 2 cents in here? So I've been to the garden several times, and I don't think he has any potted bromeliads. They're all in the landscape. They will either be mounted on trees or growing on rocks, and throughout the forest. So he will find the perfect spot, or there's a perfect amount of sunlight, and then put the plant there and hope it grows. And of course it grows, and it grows beautifully. So yeah.
Yeah, that's
He
it.
plays with what nature gives him,
You're
basically.
pretty correct. Within these years, I've learned one thing, especially with orchids, because I have some orchids and some aroids too, some cactus, but especially with the orchids, they like to develop roots. As long as they have sufficient roots in the area they are attached to, I would say they feel better, and they won't have any difficulty to grow them. But when you grow them on pots, just like I did many times ago with orchids, I still have some orchids and a few bromeliads in pots. They want to go out from that place. They are not satisfied there. So they need to find the space. That's why I think the bromeliads you can see in the pictures are so healthy and so happy, because they count on a perfect, or as I told you, an almost perfect natural condition here in the I'm here about 900 meters above sea level, and we have a very special climate here.
How
That's
can we
all.
buy your book?
Pardon?
How can we buy your book?
Oh, you can find it through the the website Now Editora is on the bottom of the picture. See, noweditora.com.br. They can send you the book over there. Can you hear me?
It doesn't show because there's a bar across the bottom that we can click on. So it's
I'll put it on the website.
okay. Thank you.
Yeah, that would be nice. And just for you to know, I was showing, this is the book, and you see, it has no photographs, okay, no photos.
All your
It's
drawings.
completely filled with my drawings. The
Your
drawings you
drawings
have
are
just
wonderful.
saw there. Let me put it right back side by side with the bromeliad. And they have an ebook to be sold too. And I just asked Simone, the editor, and she told me that can send you the physical book. I love physical books. I never read ebooks, but sometimes some of the guys cannot, they rather have ebooks, so they have it in an ebook. The paper is very nice to read, and I assure you, the English version is not a translation. It's a beautifully written English version. That girl Nicole, she writes in English in a very nice way. I love to read the book, just like if it were a book from another author, because it's very beautiful. I can assure you.
For those who are interested in getting the book, I put the link in the Bromeliad Blade of this month, along with the book review.
Thank you, Juliana.
Hello,
Yeah.
Orlando. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Barry Landau. I wanted to thank you. This is a fantastic presentation. And I believe that Scott Sandell has recorded this into a video, and he's going to make it available on the San Diego Bromeliad Society website.
Correct.
And I just want to invite you to post many of these other images on the Bromeliads in Brazil page group on Facebook, and also invite you to present many of these same photos on Planet Bromeliad. We would love to have you come over there.
I'm sure to do it. It will be a great pleasure. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you. This is a fantastic presentation for an overview of Bromeliads in Brazil. Just fantastic. Thank you.
Yeah, I tried to do something that would not be so complex, because most of you are not scientists. So if I did here a scientific presentation, it would be boring. So I tried to show beautiful pictures, and I tried my best.
It was a perfect mix of information and beautiful photos. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Your artwork is just fantastic.
Yes, jumping in. Yes, sir. I'm enthralled with your illustrative work. I'm wondering if you have made that available commercially.
You talking about my collection?
Your drawings. Yeah.
Oh, my drawings. Excuse me, I couldn't hear it perfectly. We had an event to overcome in the last year, but we couldn't do it due to the pandemics. We were going to show the pictures, and there were going to be many lectures and many things happening, but it wasn't possible. So maybe in this year we're gonna do an exposition in Rio de Janeiro. There are some invitations to many beautiful places where we can do it, and I just will let you know about it.
Beautiful illustrative work. Thank you.